Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to unravel the brief, bloody, and absolutely brilliant life of Christopher Marlowe. When we talk about the Elizabethan era, it's so easy to picture stuffy collars and rigid royalty, right? But Marlowe's life, it was anything but rigid. In fact, his actual life played out exactly like one of his own magnificent theatrical productions, a true Elizabethan tragedy, packed with espionage, dark magic, towering ambition, and, well, sudden violence. So who was the real bad boy of Elizabethan theater? Now, you might immediately be thinking of a certain bard from Stratford, but long before Shakespeare was a household name, there was Kit Marlowe. We're actually tossing out the traditional agenda today because to truly understand Marlowe, you have to instantly understand his reputation. This guy was a rebel who relentlessly pushed literally every conceivable limit. He lived his life in the dangerous shadows of London's taverns and the royal court. He challenged the literary forms of his day, the rigid religious status quo, and completely shattered social and legal norms. Basically, Christopher Marlowe lived on the absolute edge. Section 1. The Elizabethan Bad Boy. Christopher Marlowe's story begins far from the glitz of the royal court. Born to a humble Canterbury shoemaker in 1564, he would quickly grow up to challenge the very foundations of the English nation. Moving to Section 2, scholar, spy, and playwright, Marlowe was fiercely intelligent, propelling himself straight from his working-class roots all the way to Cambridge University. But his university years were shrouded in dark, expensive secrets. And this brilliantly illustrates just how incredibly short, yet action-packed, his trajectory really was. He rockets from his birth in 1564 to a massive political intervention for his master's degree in 1587, straight to a violent death by 1593. I mean, think about that. He packed more danger, art, and intrigue into exactly 29 years than most historical figures do in 80. That 1587 political intervention is where things get incredibly cinematic. Cambridge actually hesitated to grant Marlowe his master's degree. Why? Well, rumors were swirling that he was planning to cross the Channel to a seminary in France to convert to Catholicism, and under Queen Elizabeth I, that was a severe, treasonous criminal offense. But then, out of nowhere, the absolute highest authority in the land, the Queen's own Privy Council, stepped in. They sent a letter directly ordering the university to grant the degree, actually citing Marlowe's faithful dealing and good service to the country. This unprecedented intervention has led modern scholars to heavily speculate that Marlowe was actually operating as a secret agent for Sir Francis Walsingham, the Queen's legendary and ruthless spy master. Section 3. Master the Mighty Line. So our scholar spy moves to London just as professional theater is exploding, and he figured out exactly what the dangerous, rowdy city masses craved. He delivered that sensationalism and violence using a revolutionary tool, blank verse, or unrhymed iambic pentameter. In 1587, his play Tamburlaine the Great premiered, and it was a massive deal. It changed everything. He took what was a clunky rhyming format and turned it into a natural, driving, almost weaponized rhythm that was just highly, highly effective for the theatrical stage. This innovation was so profound that rival playwright Ben Jonson famously dubbed it Marlowe's Mighty Line. And with this mighty line, Marlowe practically pioneered the English Renaissance tragedy, setting the absolute gold standard for literally everyone who followed him. Section 4. The Overreaching Tragic Heroes. Forget your typical ensemble casts or polite moral tales. Marlowe basically invented the one-man tragedy, focusing with laser precision on single, larger-than-life protagonists whose unchecked ambitions completely strip them of their morality. So the crucial point here is this concept of hamartia, or a fatal flaw. Marlowe's characters weren't just cartoonishly evil. They were capable, brilliant men who had one massive weakness, usually overambition, that caused their total downfall. This fatal flaw drove the intense psychological conflict of all his Machiavellian heroes. Really, if you enjoy modern TV anti-heroes who destroy themselves through unchecked ambition, you have Christopher Marlowe to thank for that. And tragically, this whole concept perfectly mirrored his own dangerous, limit-pushing life. Take his first major hit, Tamburlaine. It follows a lowly Scythian shepherd who just decides he wants to rule the world. We watch him ruthlessly and violently climb the ladder of power until he becomes the king of Persia. It was an absolute sensation because it showcased a protagonist taking authority by pure force, totally ignoring the traditional divine right of kings. Then we have the Jew of Malta. This play follows Barabas, the ultimate Machiavellian hero who will lie, cheat, and literally murder to secure his vast wealth. It is just dripping with anti-authoritarian themes. I mean, to the point where the prologue of the play is literally narrated by the ghost of Machiavelli himself. And then there's perhaps his most famous work, Doctor Faustus. This is the story of a brilliant scholar who gets bored with normal science and medicine. So what does he do? He sells his soul to Lucifer's servant Mephistopheles in exchange for 24 years of absolute magical power. This play was utterly incendiary. Imagine sitting in a crowded Elizabethan theater while an actor draws pentagrams, chants real Latin incantations, and summons devils right onto the stage. It terrified Puritan audiences, and it perfectly mirrored Marlowe's own dangerous, heretical edge. Moving to Section 5, Shakespeare's Master and Muse. You really can't talk about Marlowe without talking about Shakespeare. Born the exact same year, 1564, Marlowe was the reigning king of London theater, while Shakespeare was really just finding his footing. Now, what's really interesting about this direct, undeniable influence is how foundational it actually was. Marlowe only wrote a handful of famous plays before he died, but they provided the direct plot material and thematic inspiration for some of Shakespeare's biggest hits. Marlowe's The Jew of Malta clearly paved the way for Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. His dark, supernaturally ambitious Doctor Faustus is the undeniable blood relative to Shakespeare's Macbeth. Shakespeare wasn't just inspired, he was constantly trying to one-up the standard that Marlowe set. And the respect was highly mutual and profound. In his play As You Like It, Shakespeare actually quotes Marlowe directly, writing, "Dead shepherd, now I find thy saw of might, who ever loved that loved not at first sight." It's a really touching tribute that illustrates the immense respect his contemporaries had for the man they affectionately called the Muse's darling. But why was he the dead shepherd? That brings us to Section 6, A Great Reckoning. This is where Marlowe's life imitates his dark art in the most terrifying way. His own fatal flaws, his alleged atheism, his brawling, his dangerous connections, finally caught up with him in May of 1593. The tension really started building when a fellow playwright, Thomas Kidd, was arrested and brutally tortured over some seditious, heretical documents found in his room. Under torture, Kidd pointed the finger squarely at Marlowe. He claimed the papers were Marlowe's and basically called him a blasphemous religious reprobate. Immediately, an arrest warrant was issued for Christopher Marlowe by the Privy Council. The walls were rapidly closing in. Let's move to the official 1925 coroner's report and see how this builds like a brutal, real-time tragedy. Step 1. On May 30th, 1593, Marlowe spends the day at a boarding house in Deptford with 3 men, all of whom happen to have ties to the intelligence underworld. Step 2. After dinner, a fierce dispute breaks out over the bill, also known as the reckoning. Step 3. Marlowe, lying on a couch, snatches the dagger of a man named Ingram Fraser and slashes him on the head. Step 4. In the struggle, Fraser drives the dagger back into Marlowe, stabbing him just above the right eye, killing him instantly. A violently sudden end over a simple dinner bill. Or was it? Because the men in that room were known state spies, the true nature of his death is still an intense historical mystery today. I mean, we've got several wild, persistent theories here. Was it an assassination ordered by the Queen herself due to his subversive atheism? Maybe a hit by members of the Privy Council who feared he would expose them. There's even a theory that Sir Walter Raleigh ordered the hit to prevent Marlowe from implicating him under torture. And get this, there is even a theory that his death was entirely fate, so he could escape his impending heresy trial and execution. The exact truth died in that little room in Deptford, but we are left with a legacy that changed storytelling forever. Which leads us to this final thought. If his fatal flaw hadn't caught up with him at just 29 years old, what heights might Marlowe's mighty line have reached? Would we be studying Marlowe today instead of Shakespeare? It's a tragic, incredibly fascinating question, and honestly, a fitting legacy for literature's ultimate bad boy.